The first step in turning our existing builder into a true blueprint is to replace the builder's single object field with a series of backing fields, one for each property of the target class. For country, we have properties for the abbreviation, description, ID, name, postal code label, and state label. I haven't created a with method for the ID field just yet, but we'll get there soon enough. Next, we'll need to update the build method to do some actual work, constructing the object and setting its properties as appropriate, rather than simply returning an object that's already been built in place. After creating an entirely new country from scratch, it returns it to the caller. I'll need to head down here to the various with methods and update them to use the individual backing fields rather than properties of the single object field like we had earlier. Country Builder now operates almost identically to the country mother from the last module, right down to one of its problems. If I were to call the build method multiple times, I'd get multiple different instances of identical objects back, just as I would have gotten multiple new objects from a country mother. This might actually come in handy, but I'm going to stick with the behavior builders have had up until now when there was a backing field involved. I'll do this by adding that backing field back in, but instead of instantiating it right away, I'll update the build method so that it populates the field on only the first call and returns the same object on any subsequent calls. Again, this is another optional behavior. You could decide to treat builders like true blueprints, where they can be reused over and over again to create multiple copies of the same plan. It's a matter of preference, but if you find yourself needing multiple copies of very similar objects, then I'd argue that what you really need is a new specialized factory method. I've finished up Country Builder and updated State Builder to the new pattern so we can look at the next issue. State Builder still requires a fully created country to operate on. Part of what we're trying to accomplish here is to stop building too many objects up front before the plan is complete. We could change the backing field for the child objects to hold references to their builders instead, but this makes it awkward to pass in a known value from the outside. What we can do is give our builders another with method, which by convention I'll call with_object. Now we can pass in a concrete value for the country, and the with_object method will take care of all the messy details. When a user wants to pass in a specific country, we'll just store it away as the value property of the child builder. And after updating all of our tests to use the new builders, the tests are still passing. So far, so good. There's still the issue of child objects being constructed up front, though. Here in State Builder's with_country method, we still require a fully instantiated country object, and all the work that went into creating it. .NET's lazy class is a way to defer the creation of a value until later, which makes it perfect for what we're doing here. A lazy value isn't really a value at all. It's a placeholder and instructions for how to get a value in the form of a .NET function. Continuing with the blueprint analogy from earlier, we start with a plan for how to generate a value, such as a string, an integer, or even a complex object, and we store that plan in an instance of the lazy class. When we ask the lazy instance for its value, it then executes that plan and returns the object. Up until we ask for the value, all the lazy is holding is a function. In addition to taking known values, we'll add the ability to take in a function that returns those values. This will let us defer the creation of the child objects until they're actually needed. We just need to replace the builder's backing fields with lazy values of the same type. We'll give them all initial values based on the default for their type, so string fields like abbreviation and description would be null by default, and integer fields like ID would have the value 0. We could simply hardcode these values rather than using the default keyword, but we're establishing a pattern here that we'll build on in the next module. I'll adjust the build method so that it instantiates a lazy instance and assigns it to the backing field, and then adjust the calls to fill in the properties by adding a dot value to the end of each one. Finally, the call to return the object will need to return the object's value property instead. Next, we'll pair up the with methods with new versions that take a function whose result is the correct type, rather than a concrete value. We'll assign this function into the lazy backing field, and then replace the guts of the original function with a call to the new one, passing the provided value as a lambda expression. Now we can pass in a value if we have one, or a function to create the value we want. This function can even be a call to another builder, but now that builder won't execute until the parent builder's build method is called. I'll finish up the rest of the conversions and see you in a bit. I've completed the country builder, state builder, and address builder classes, so we can take a look at that Joe customer shipping address example from earlier. I've implemented it here as an additional factory method on the address builder called Joe customer shipping. It does the same job as before, so we have easy access to this predefined instance of address, and the tests are still easy to read. One thing has become very clear though. Although my tests are now easier to read and understand compared to where we started, my builders are getting harder to maintain. Every time I add a property, I have to add a new backing field, 3 different with methods, and update the build method. This is an awful lot of code to maintain, and staying on top of it is going to be a challenge, not to mention time-consuming. We'll solve that problem in the next module. In this module, we created simple but functional object builders based on the object mothers from the last module. Then we put off the creation of the target object by replacing the single backing field with individual fields for each property. Finally, we made the backing fields lazy so that even the child objects aren't evaluated until later. In the next module, we'll factor out the commonalities in this code and set up a code generation system to get rid of the boring, repetitive parts of implementing this pattern.